That was President Obama yesterday reacting to the mass shooting in San Bernardino last night. In an interview with CBS, he said we need to be above the politics to end the violence. Joining us now is Cove Strategies co-founder Mercedes Schlapp. Mercedes, thanks very much for weighing in this morning. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Maria. Well, obviously, it's a tragic day in our country, and again, we do see these mass shootings occurring. With that being said, there's still so many questions out there. Obviously, we need to figure out if this was a terrorist attack. It's something you've all been talking about on the show. And even though the president jumps quickly into saying we need more gun control, this will stop the mass shootings, quite frankly, if this 28-year-old shooter did pass the background check and had no criminal record, there was no stopping this man. He was going to obtain a weapon. He was going to plan this shooting, and obviously he carried it out, Maria. So, again, it really does bring in the fact that for the president, he moves quickly into this political spot of talking about gun control as opposed to saying, what do we need to talk about here? Is it about radical Islam in America? I mean, addressing these other complicated issues which are part of this formula that we're seeing that's happening.
Look, I realized that the president was in the middle of an interview when he was responding. He was asked the question, but without knowing any details.
That's right.
The police are not ruling out terrorism. We know that these two were all suited up. They had GoPro cameras on. They had assault weapons. All the, it looks like, feels like that there was some terrorism here, but without knowing any details, he launched right into gun control policy and said that this doesn't happen in other countries.
Right, and I think that this is where the president just goes into his comfort zone. The president, as we know, when he talked to the intelligence officials that basically said, we don't have ISIS contained, that was not the narrative that the president talked about, in a couple of weeks ago with ISIS, for example. It is an area where the president does not feel comfortable when he has to address this issue of radical Islam. And so I think for that matter, Maria, it's an incredibly complicated issue. I wish he would have taken the approach of Governor Jerry Brown from California, who basically said, we're praying for the victims and we're going to bring these killers to justice. Let's focus on the law enforcement part, ensuring that, these buildings, for example, that they are taking the steps necessary for security. Exactly. Let's talk about those issues.
I just want to point out, this is not complicated, but certainly repugnant. This is the cover of the New York Daily News. God isn't fixing this. And this is the tweets of Republican presidential candidates sending out their thoughts and prayers to the victims and the families of the victims, calling these individuals cowards who could truly end the gun scourge. The bodies had not yet been counted, the relatives not yet been notified, and that is how a major national newspaper responds. We're a New York City newspaper.
Right to politics.
Yeah, right to politics. But right to politics, and also condemning the religion of these individuals and a large part of this country.
Yeah. Well, isn't this the problem? Like, we effectively go into automatic partisan response. That's basically an automatic partisan response. But it does create, like, if I just look at my Twitter stream this morning, it's basically Republicans say terrorism and, another group says gun control. Is that where we're at on this?
I really believe that that's the narrative that both parties have taken to a certain extent, in the sense that, do we have to focus on gun control legislation? Will that come up in Congress? Is the president going to move into executive order action on gun control? And this is an area that the president really wants to move forward on, which has been talking about executive orders for gun control. With that being said, does that solve the problem? Are we getting to the core of this problem, which is, if in fact, the first question we all asked ourselves last night, I'm sure, was, were these people Muslim? Were they radicalized? What happened here? We always want to find out who the shooter is. And so the question will become is that it's not such a simple answer to say gun control is going to solve these mass shootings. That's not going to be the case. We need to ensure that we have law-abiding citizens that are able to carry their weapons. I know that the case that we had this individual in the printing, across the street who was carrying his weapon. He heard what had happened. I mean, you want to have the security available for these individuals to feel that they're safe, because the question becomes, if someone comes into your building, what do you do? And how do you prepare? And so I think in that case, it's just become unfortunately, a very partisan issue. But again, I don't think that the president's approach right now is not addressing the core of the problem, that which could be terrorism.
Mercedes, thank you for weighing in. We appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Mercedes Schlapp there.